go.
Fantastic. Welcome to joint flossing. So I want to talk a little bit about joint flossing from a different perspective, right? So we think about movement and some of the physiological benefits of movement, whether it be creating integration, whether developing the lubrication qualities of moving synovial fluid in the joint capsule, whether it be the benefit of the tissues, warming up the tissues, resiliency, capacity. These are some of the physiological benefits of joint flossing. There's another piece to it though, and that is the neurological benefits. And this is where it gets very interesting. When we start looking at when stress turns to strain, the various receptors in the joints come to the rescue. And the way that they come to the rescue is one set of receptors will become dominant. It will be the hero. I got this. It goes into a mode of fight, flight, or freeze, a sympathetic response. It's called hypertonic. That hypertonicity is what keeps us safe. However, that hypertonicity requires resources. So that means that there's something else, another group of receptors that are willing to give up their resources to support that main dominant group of receptors that's the hero. When we use joint flossing in a specific manner to toggle between these receptors, we're building homeostasis back into the nervous system. And that's what we're looking to do, is to create homeostasis. There are various levels of doing this. We're going to go over the first level. The first level is learning the vocabulary movement across the joint. The next level would be how to use that in an assessment process so you can specifically target and toggle the different movements that are paired. And when I say paired, I'm talking about this relationship between the receptor that requires resources and the receptors that are giving up resources. So that's the basics of the neurological reasons why joint flossing is so potent. So what we're going to do is we're going to do what I call a bottom-up movement progression. And we're going to start with the rear tripod. Now the rear tripod is the calcaneus, the cuboid, and the navicular. So we're going to all bring our right foot forward. And we're going to come to the lateral blade of our foot. And we're going to start to notice the load. We want to look for, instead of having the load evenly across the whole blade, I want you to have 80% of your weight in your calcaneus. One of the things you want to notice is, are you able to keep your sternum vertical and your breath relaxed? Now we're going to come to the medial blade. We're going to tap the first metaphalangeal joint. And we're going to start to floss back and forth, nice and slow. So this would be the coronal plane movement of the calcaneus.
Do you like a,
Right.
do you
So
like
this
a
is-
certain breath pattern with that?
Pardon me?
Do you like a certain breath pattern or just breathing?
I think of just a relaxed breath because this is very low load.
Okay.
And so it's just completely relaxed. Now we're going to bring, on the lateral blade, we're going to bring our heel off the ground. And so we're gonna cantilever the fifth metatarsal head on the cuboid. And then we're gonna come down. And we're gonna start to floss this.
Good one for me.
Right? So this is a challenging movement,
Make sure you
right? This is starting to recover the ability to be sprain proof. We want to sprain proof our ankles. Now this is related to inversion and supination. When we swing, we land fifth through first in a forward gait. Next, we're going to come to ball of foot. Soften toes, heel off the ground. Surge forward. What we're doing is we're lengthening the plantar fascia here. Yeah. And so from a side view, we're looking at lengthening this tissue as we load. This cantilever action is acting on the navicular. This particular movement is what initiates hip flexion. Good. Now we're going to come back to the lateral blade. We're going to roll up, fifth, fourth, third, second, first, and down. And then across. And that becomes a circle. Now here's a nuance. Pause. Draw your kneecap up. This is closed and packed. As we move across, bent knee, we come back to close and pack. That's what's going to protect our knee as we go through the inversion, eversion of the calcaneus. Yeah, good. So this is a forward gait. A lateral gait would be the opposite. Medial blade, up to first, second, third, fourth, fifth, down to calcaneus, closed and packed. Notice what's happening in your toes. Are your toes soft? Are they active in trying to recruit and stabilize? Good. Now just take a step forward and back and notice the difference between that right foot and the left foot. Now let's come to the left foot. Closed and packed. Rolling through the calcaneus. So this would be a sagittal, or excuse me, a coronal plane movement, or it's related to roll. Lateral blade, rolling up to the fifth med head, and starting to surge into the cuboid. As you do this, you're going to start to notice that you're able to get your foot more and more vertical. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for being able to load the ligaments of the fibula. And then we're going to come to ball foot and surge into the navicular. If the navicular is related to hip flexors, the cuboid is related to hip abductors. And And then we'll make the circle. And then we'll reverse that circle. Good. Next, we're going to come to the talus. We're going to come to a split stance. You want, in your split stance, you want your foot about one of your own foot length width.
Between or like?
So we want to look at the relationship between the rear foot external rotation, about 30 degrees. So we don't want a 45 degree. We want about 30 degrees. Here, think about knee extending, hip extending. From there, we're going to work specifically on the talocrural joint, which is tibia rotation. Tibia rotation is kind of a hard visual cue. I like to think about it as the fibula. We want to think about rotating the fibula back. So we've got the lateral malleolus, the distal head of the fibula. We want to roll the fibula back. This is supination, fibula forward, pronation. So external rotation of the tibia, supination, fibula back, internal rotation of the tibia, the fibula comes forward. This is pronation, supination, pronation, supination. There is rock in the forefoot, but we want to keep our toes on the ground, and we want to, as evenly as possible, keep load on our forefoot. When we come into pronation, we are going to be having more load on our first met head, but we don't want to lift our fifth met off the ground. So we're keeping it grounded. Yeah. Good. And so here, fibula back. Maintain that fibula back action. Notice how that activates your external hip rotators, right? This is extremely important in the push phase of the gait, that our external hip rotators rotated, because they couple with our glute. Let's switch foot. Ankle extending, knee extending, hip extending. Fibula back. Supination. Pronation, supination. Pronation, supination. Pronation, supination. Pronation, supination. Now here's the challenging bit. Can we initiate movement from the ankle while the rest of our structure remains reasonably still? Yes, it's following the ankle, but it's not leading the ankle. Tricky, huh? It's hard. Fibula back, knee extending. Good. That's going to increase your activation of your glutes.
Yeah. There's some in my
Right? And so if we don't have appropriate supination, we can't have appropriate glute activation.
Yeah, my glutes are firing.
This relationship of being able to go between supination, pronation, resupination is extremely important.
But now, so as you hold the supination, squeeze your hip forward. Okay.
Good,
Now I
good.
get it, okay.
Okay, now that we have that, everybody come to like the table or the wall or something to give you some support. I'm gonna use the table right here. So we're gonna start with right leg back, fibula back, ankle extending, knee extending, hip extending. Supination back leg, pronation front leg. The knee is going to travel over between the first ray and second ray. Then we're going to start to glide forward, and while maintaining this back leg, this glide forward is called surge. It's a coronal plane movement where we're surging into the sagittal plane. We're surging into the sagittal plane.
As you extend the left knee, are you focusing on supinating into the lateral edge of the foot at all, or just trying to keep it pretty even on the front leg?
Can you say
On
that?
your front knee, when you extend your front knee back, are you going into slight supination, or are you just focusing on that first mat head?
I am not going into supination here. I am staying in pronation.
Okay, okay.
It's almost like a neutral pronation though.
Okay,
It's not like heavy deep into pronation.
got you.
And that's actually how the knee is tracking is so important, because if your knee is coming across your midline going into the first ray or beyond, then you're going to be in a heavy supination, and that actually puts torque on the knee, and we want the knee in neutral because we want to just focus on the talus and start to play with finding your depth.
Let's say we have an ankle injury in the back foot, and you can't even feel the front one, all we feel is the stretch and the issue in the back. How could we
Shorten your
adjust it?
stance a little bit. Change your posture so that you're leaning into the table more.
Even into your toe.
So that so not only you're closing the chain, but you're also gaining support because your ligament strength isn't developed to where you can support the weight of your structure yet.
Sounds like good.
This next piece is a little bit harder. So we're going to come to the lateral blade. Fibula back, ankle extending, knee extending, hip extending. We're going to glide our knee out at about 30 degrees. Now there's something that's very interesting about the talus. The talus has two predominant motions, sagittal and coronal. It does not have rotation, yaw, or transverse plane motion. That motion comes from the tibia or the calcaneus. This is a primary motion of the talus that is missing in most people's movement repertoire. This is what causes ankle sprains, because they don't have capacity when they find themselves in a movement deviation, like walking a trail and a rock turns under you. And do you have the ability to load the lateral blade of your foot?
Question, if people have foot broken, like broken foot or?
Screws and plates.
Right, and this is also why we have to do our ligament resets, so that we can restore the ability for the ligaments to respond appropriately to this kind of stress. Go ahead and close the chain. And when you close the chain, see how much more of your foot can you get? Yeah. Nice. Okay, so now we're going to switch sides. Give you that, ankle extending, knee extending, hip extending. Surging forward. So now, let's take a pause. Everybody get an indicator. What's yes, what's no. Now come to the movement, do a repetition. What's yes, what's no. I went hypertonic. There's a problem there. What is that problem? Now, because it's hypertonic, it's that double stem that we have to do. So I'm going to stem, hypertonic. Is it limbic? No. Is it physiological? No. Is it structural? Yes. Is it related to lateral? Yes. So now I can start to get very specific, and if we know how to pair ligaments, we can pair the ligaments and we can start to recover. If we don't know how to do any of that kind of work that's PDTR style neurology, what we can do is we can just come and we can brush. Right? And so what's that doing is that's starting to tone down the nervous system so that we have access to that movement without creating a neurological stress from the hypertonic response. Right? So this is, I know that I have an issue here because this is the talus that I broke in 1985. And I've been working on this for years and years. Normally responsive down, just doing one little tone down. And so we all have that capacity to use this as a modality for self-healing. And then we'll come to the lateral blade. And so when I talk about, there was a 10-year period in my life where I'd spend 2 or 3 hours doing this kind of work, it's because I'm tinkering, trying to improve my movement. Because when we start looking at athletic performance, as you get to the upper echelon of performance, it's very little pieces that make the big difference. It's easy to get the big pieces. It's the little pieces that we're looking for. Good. Now walk a little bit. Integrate.
Yeah, just out of it, I can feel some meat grinding.
Okay, next. So we've got the next group of muscles in the tarsals. We've done the rear foot tripod, navicular, cuboid, calcaneus, talus, cuneiforms. The cuneiforms are hard to gain access to. The cuneiforms respond to the rotary motion of moving the forefoot through the phase of gait. So how we're going to do that is, it's best to close the chain, support the structure. We're going to rise to ball foot. Are you on the lateral blade or are you on ball foot? This is a little bit low for me. I'm going to come to the wall. So now, ball of foot, extending, crown to the ceiling. Maintain that. Bend through the knees. Maintain all this. Swivel both knees to one side. Maintaining this lift through the heels. And we're going to floss back and forth. Right? For you need more support for your structure.
Or just by coming up here and
By closing the chain, or even you can come to sitting. If that's too much, if that's creating a stress in the knee, come to sitting and start to get it that way. That way you're starting to introduce the movement to your structure without creating stress and strain.
Yeah, 'cause you don't want that grinding, right?
Right? So go nice and slow. Good. Nice. So this is this concept of we need to regress so that we can progress. Good, good. Okay, next. Ready to move on? Here we go.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna come to our toes. You're gonna lift your toes up. Now spread your toes wide. Spread, spread, spread. Now place your toes down and gently claw. And then release. Lift, spread, claw, release. Lift, spread, claw, release. Lift, spread, claw, release. Lift, spread, claw, release. Good. Now walk a little bit. See what that feels like.
This one's better.
Now there's more that you could do with the feet, but this is just the introduction. Next piece. We're gonna start looking at this relationship of inversion of and eversion of the ankles and the relationship to the knee. To do that, we're gonna come to the medial blade of our left foot and lateral blade of our right foot. And then we're gonna switch. Now, this is a very challenging movement to initiate from the ankles. Our propensity is to lead with swaying the hips. We want to keep our pelvis still so that the movement is coming from just the ankles. Dan, see if moving your feet a little closer together, how that feels for you. Yeah. Right? And so this is that integration of having access to tibia rotation bilaterally. Now, lateral blade side is the side that you dip to, and then it becomes a circle. So this particular movement is often dubbed as a knee movement.
It is not.
Oh no,
It's actually
my
required,
knee's fine right now, but my outer ankle is like F you.
right? This is actually ankle integrating with the knee,
It's like a ball and stretching everything in the front.
right? So the knee is a stable joint. The ankle is a mobile joint. If the mobile joint doesn't have the capacity to be mobile, the stable joint will try to do the job of the mobile joint, and it can't. And that's how a lot of knee injuries occur. Let's change direction. By the same token, the knee also needs to be able to integrate with the hip joint. The hip joint is the next mobile joint up the chain. So let's come to the hip joint. We're gonna start with wide legs. We're gonna shift our hip to the right. The adductors are eccentrically lengthening. And then we're gonna shift to the left. Now see if when you shift, are you keeping your sternum vertical or are you leaning over to compensate? right, and then come to the left. So if I have a still point here, I'm moving around this fulcrum of the sternum, keeping stable sternum. Good, now we're gonna shift right. We're gonna bring our focus to our right hip capsule, and we're gonna bring our pelvis back, and then we'll bring our pelvis forward. And we're gonna start to floss this C, and then we're gonna make it into a stop. What you'll notice is that the left hip is going to try to play. I want you to see if you can keep load in the right leg so that the right hip is doing the work and the left hip is following.
It starts popping around inside of.
Well, it's popping around because that joint hasn't been moved in this way and it needs that motion to restore. Now we're going to come to the left hip. And we're going to do the same thing with the left hip. We want to move slow so that we can feel and sense. We don't want to rush through the blank places where we don't have access to. We'll never gain access to those regions if we do that. Now we're going to do both simultaneously.
Could teach a dance class, Joseph.
Pardon me?
Dance class.
This is dance class.
For sure. I love all this stuff though. This is my bread and butter.
Bread and butter.
I love
And
it.
then we're going to switch direction.
So we're keeping our legs, knees pretty locked, right?
Yes.
It's like Feldenkrais.
Though not locked if you have hyperextended
Yeah, not
knees.
hyperextended, yeah.
So if you feel it in your low back, does that mean you're compensating?
That means your low back is compensating for your hips. That's
Okay.
correct. Exactly. Exactly. Okay. Next, we're going to come to some basic movements. Close your chin. Find a single leg stance. Throw your foot in front. And then as your leg comes down, you're going to just scrape the ground a little bit so that you're not lifting through the hip. And then we're going to start to floss like that. This is sagittal plane or pitch, and here's the fulcrum.
Do we think
It
about
would
Good.
be like
And then we're going to bring our leg to the side. We're going to cross our midline, and then we're going to abduct. Maintaining crown to coccyx alignment, sternum vertical. So the movement is coming purely from the hip.
what if we can't do that?
Decrease your range of motion till you can. And then we're going to pause. Heel, rotate in. Heel, rotate out. Keeping closed impact knee so that the movement is not coming from the foot or the knee, but from the femur.
Wow.
The standing leg is
Yeah, I
the
know.
one that's like, hello.
Alright, I'm screaming over here. Good. Like, what are you doing?
And then, huh?
I said I love all this.
Good, good. Now we'll switch sides. And then we'll come to medial. So repetitions. It might be that you'll start with 3, 4, 5 repetitions. Eventually, as your nervous system builds resilience, you'll be able to work in that 10 to 12 repetition range. It will take a while, months, to build that resilience. one thing I want you to notice, if your leg, when you're crossing the midline and your foot is forward, are you compensating by externally rotating to get the hip height, or are you maintaining that neutral position of the femur?
Mm. Yeah.
And then walk a little bit.
We need to do the other thing there.
Excuse me? We're gonna get to that.
Will they get them to teach a couple classes here?
Okay,
Teach a couple classes.
Yeah.
next, we're gonna come to the front. It's a little bit harder balancing on a squishy mat than having a solid floor. And we're going to just draw a nice circle. This is why closing the chain, there's nothing wrong with closing the chain to help you balance. And then we're gonna change direction. Noticing, is the leg staying neutral? Or are you rotating the right leg out? See your external rotation? See if you can mute that and maintain a stable, neutral rotation. Change legs. Change direction. Simple, but not easy. Next, at the front circle. Come to hip extension. And we have the circle with hip extension.
Do you care if the foot is dorsiflexed or plantar flexed?
I am slightly dorsal flexed. What I more care about is this relationship of the lateral blade staying parallel to the midline. Instead of going our propensity is going to external rotation. And then change legs.
Sweating.
It's getting hot in here.
We're gonna have more than naked feet soon.
And then we'll change direction.
Getting sweaty.
Rated R. Rated R joint flossing.
Good. Now, we're gonna put those two movements together. And we're gonna come up. And notice that this relationship of rotation, I'm not doing this yet, I'm maintaining a stable rotation. And then we'll change direction. Okay, we're gonna have fun timing.
I believe in us.
Nice. I tend to like to come to extension first and start from a place of extension. I find that helps my mind know where my end range of motion is in my back body.
Wow.
Good. Let's walk a little bit. Right, so we want to unload, because that creates residual tension in the hips.
Sure does.
For sure.
Sure does.
And this is because we don't have resiliency in these motions, even though they are required in our walking gait.
Wow.
We walk around those motions that we do not have access to, literally. Next, internal rotation. Internal rotation is coupled with adduction. So we're going to do a cross-body circle. start to grow this one. Not necessarily in height, but also in width. Nice. We'll choose legs. Change direction. Start to grow. Good. You know what? We don't have to train external rotation.
Right.
Unless you have someone that is a predominant pigeon-toed person. But most of us aren't. So there's always an exception. There are no rules. There's exceptions. This is one of my favorite hip exercises. So we're going to start with this internal, external, internal, external, internal, ankle extending, knee extending, hip extending, go back. Internal, external, internal, external, internal, external, internal, ankle extending, knee extending, go back. Ankle extending, knee extending, go back. Why is this such an important movement? Let's think about the external hip rotators. What are the external hip rotators doing in internal rotation as we're moving into supination? They have to eccentrically lengthen to support the structure. Good. Next. Internal rotation, extend. External rotation, sweep. Right, dancer style.
Yeah. I know,
It's
I'm
the
loving all
opposite.
this stuff. I'm like, my ballet days are coming. All my ballet and Feldenkrais training, it's in there.
Internal, extend. External, sweep.
Real choreography.
And then we'll switch directions. External, internal, sweep. External.
Yeah, they're all like bondage on.
Yeah.
positions. I'm like, this is all like,
Yes.
you know what I mean?
Right? Oh yeah, ballet's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Ballet's awesome. And then let's walk a little bit and feel how alive we're starting to feel because we're waking up our lower extremity. Huh? Look at that, swivel, there's some swivel going on in the house. I like it. Okay, next.
We'll see. We might look like.
Once we start to do this, we need to put this together in a way that's more meaningful for our nervous system by starting to assemble these components. And so we're gonna look at that gait, and we're gonna start with, there's gonna be 3 main movements here that we're gonna do. Shift, swing, and sway. Shift is related to this relationship of the deep longitudinal kinetic chain, the ability to move from pronation and supination, to shift between those. So we'll start with this position of, maybe go back, ankle extending, knee extending, hip extending. Knee over that space between the first and second leg. Pronation front leg, supination back leg. Notice not the direction of your pelvis, because your pelvis is rotated. This relationship, if you were to draw parallel lines with, along your feet, along the axis of your feet, that is the axis that you want to move your spine in. We're going to reach back, toe to shin. This then becomes pronation, and this is supination.
You go as far as that, or do you want to stay more just on
Toe
the
to
other
shin,
top?
toe to shin,
Okay.
toe to shin. Shift. Ankle extending, knee extending, hip and extending. Really get that shift. It's very important. So here we're hip hinging, shifting from supination to pronation, from pronation to supination. And start to floss back and forth between these. Now what you will find is that your back leg quadricep group isn't used to doing this kind of motion unless you've been training it. Good. Now, let's add the arms. So in this position, we're going to be here, where elbow is in alignment with shoulder, supinated hand. It's contralateral, pronated hand, ankle extended, shift, 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 shift. Good. And then we'll switch legs. Ankle extending, knee extending, hip extending. Pronation, supination, shift. The more that you dorsal flex, the better. Notice the plantar surface of your foot, that you're not going into inversion or eversion as your dorsal flexion. Keep that neutral. Good. Now let's add the arms. Shift, 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 shift. This is home position. Make sure in home position you're getting your sternum up, crown up. When we come down, the propensity is to look at the same gaze that we did when we were at the home position. We need to look down so that we keep our occiput neutral. Or else we're going to go into cervical extension. Nice, nice. Now let's walk a little bit. How's everybody feeling?
Great.
Okay. Swing. See this motion of the ankle? That is a knee circle in pronation. We can use that to land in our best supination. Supination, pronation. Come to ball of foot. Tip of toe. Toe to medial malleolus. Reach back, tip of toe. Ball of foot. Heel. Start to find that toe off action. Yeah. Good. Now we're gonna add the arms. The toe off comes to hip flexion. And then it's gonna reach back. Landing in that home position. Here, extend the leg, bend the knee till the heel connects, and then we're at the other side. Shift. Excuse me, swing. Little bit. It's only 9 in the morning. I need to finish my coffee. Now there's some more nuances that we can do with this. For example, we can start to look at the relationship of the torso to our pelvis. This is counter rotation. So there's 3 counter rotations in the body. There's the pelvis, the torso, and the cervical. They're coupled. Ooh, this floor's funny. I'm used to a stiff floor. So my left leg stance is more stable than my right leg stance. And doesn't that make sense? Because it's my right talus and that's where so this is my work. You know, I work on this and it's still not right, but it's better than it was if I didn't work on it. And so to find counter rotation of the cervical, you find a feature in your environment to gaze on. It's called the drishti, or a focal point. And you keep your eyes focused on that focal point. Good. And then walk a little bit. See if that changes how you organize your gait. So in joint flossing, there's this process of continual taking inventory. What are the sensations in the body? Are there feelings or emotions, associations, memories that are attached to those sensations? What's happening in the mind stream? Are we present? Are we sensing? Are we being hijacked out of the moment by something that happened in the past, or that something we're planning for in the future? This is all part of this spectrum of, can we be mindful and present with our movement practice? Okay. This next piece, I consider it a pretty challenging piece. We're going to start with this idea of coming to external rotation. Coming to ball foot and internal rotation. External, internal. External, internal. Okay. That's the action that we're looking for. Now we're going to apply that action. We're going to bring toes together, big toe together, heels apart, so that the lateral blades of our foot are mostly parallel. We're going to isometrically internally rotate. Isometrically adduct with internal isometric rotation. Let that release. Isometrically external rotate, abduct. Here's the hard bit. Co-activation. We want to internally rotate, externally rotate, abduct, adduct simultaneously, so that we're fully activating the cylinders of our thighs, our pelvis, and we're closing packing our sacroiliac joint. The term closed and packed refers to protecting the joint capsule of that particular joint that's the target that you're closing and packing. This closes and packs our sacroiliac joint. Okay, walk a little bit. That's going to be something very new. Katie's still processing it.
I thought my pubic horn would be replaced, so that was positive.
Okay, so that is going to be our foundation. Now we're going to come to what we're going to do with our upper body. We're going to come to a 45-degree beat. We're going to draw our scapula back, draw the tips of our scapula forward so that our sternum moves forward. Then
He means the inferior tip.
the inferior tibia. Hands, wide hands. Imagine you're holding a basketball.
How should your feet be? Is it?
We're not at the feet yet.
Okay.
We're just learning the upper architecture. We're going to go to reaching one arm to the ceiling, the other arm to the side. Reach, 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 reach. We are eccentrically lengthening our core. Reach, 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 reach. The cervical spine is following the thoracic spine. Good. Relax your arms, because that's shoulder work, huh? Now let's come back to this closed impact pelvis. Co-activation. Maintain that co-activation.
Did you want an external abduction or the?
Internal.
Co-activation, all of it. All four of those actions.
Correct.
All four.
Adduction, abduction, internal rotation, external rotation, all felt at the same time.
How do you do the triple external rotation?
Notice that you're able to go deeper. That's because you have the actual support of your pelvis. You have a base, a foundation. Ingress, this arm stays parallel to the ground. This arm is perpendicular, reaching to the ceiling.
Like an L.
Yeah.
Like an L.
Huh? Like an L.
For love.
Okay. That's core activation, friends. Now, we're going to add one more piece. This may or may not be appropriate for where your current capacity is. Try it. If it's not within your capacity, don't do it until you've practiced this for a while and start to play with, can I do it? right? Go ahead and watch first. So now we're going to single leg abduct. Oh, this floor is fun. Whole other level. And then it starts to flow. Really hard on this floor. A solid surface gives you more feedback and it gives you
It's
a
like-
firmer base to,
It's like a
for
Bosu
ground
ball.
force reaction.
You know?
And this is like, it's like this run, yeah. But that's okay, that's okay.
Extra challenge.
Yeah, totally.
Getting an
So,
extra challenge, Joseph.
close and pack pelvis, our victory V, right? Because we're victorious in our practice. Abduct, and then start to roll through the thoracic spine. Close and pack. Reconfirm closed and packed pelvis. Notice how that closed and packed pelvis helps your single leg stance. This
You want
case-
to maintain the adduction part, like no external rotation with it, correct?
Correct.
To try and keep that,
Right,
maintain that base.
right.
Okay, that's harder.
It's quite a bit, quite a bit hard. Because our propensity is to externally rotate. Because
For sure.
why is that? The piriformis attachment on the sacrum, when we activate the piriformis, it gives the nervous system the perception that it's closing
Yeah.
the SI joint rather than it having to gap and stabilize.
Sure. Yeah. Makes sense.
Okay. Well, let's take a break. Let's walk a little bit. Now, it's 9:15. We're going to take a 15-minute break.